Ole, yeah. Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Church. This is our in-gathering service. We provide a clarion call to all progressives who have traveled far and wide this summer to return home once again. This is our home. This is our religious home, our spiritual home, our home where it is safe to take off our shoes and just be ourselves in the company of friends. This morning we welcome everyone back, and we also extend a warm welcome to those who are relatively new to this church and to those who are visiting for the very first time. So how do I describe this congregation to those who are just visiting this morning for the very first time, crossing that threshold into this church? Well, let me tell you that we consider ourselves a fun congregation, a congregation deeply committed to promoting the inherent worth and dignity of every single person on this planet. We play well together, and we wish we could sing as well as we play. We are coffee connoisseurs and nurturers of children. We unflinchingly embrace the issues of our time, and not once did this congregation believe that Hurricane Dorian was headed for Alabama. Not once. But most importantly, we are an inclusive congregation, ready to extend our arms in welcome to anyone and everyone who seeks a religious home. Symbol of light and of knowledge, symbol of warmth and freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love. May we open our in-gathering Sunday service by turning our hymn books, please, to number 361. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Why didn't you guys come on in? There we go. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. were the words to that song again? Welcome. How are you? The big question I have for you this morning is, where have you been? Where have you been? Just hanging? Anybody get a chance to go away? Okay. Where'd you go? Where? Camping, okay. In Canada. Wow. Great. Does it feel like it's time to come back to church? I know. It was a loaded question. I know. Well, we are happy to have you back. You can sit down for a second. Sure. You know why we're happy to have you back? Because it doesn't feel like a church without you. You are extremely important. In fact, some would say you are probably the most pivotal part of the entire church experience. We come together to help educate, have fun, and learn from you, as well as us hopefully passing along some few chestnuts about life to all of you. So it is great to have you here. Now, I can say, the church year can begin because all of you are here. Thanks so very much.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm Monica. I'm the assistant minister. If we haven't met, it's great to see you. I'm glad you're here. And I want to tell you a quick little story. Yesterday, my daughter and I were out in public together. And surprise. And I said something, I don't even remember what we were talking about. I said something about looking on the bright side, and she looked at me with horror in her eyes, and she said, "Oh my God, you're an optimist." Well, it's not the first time that I've been accused of being an optimist, but I think that Unitarian Universalists are optimistic people, right? We're optimists. We think the glass is at least half full. There's lots of things to be thankful for. It's a beautiful green world. The sun has come out. It's a beautiful Sunday. And no matter what bad things are happening in the world, we have 7 principles that tie us all together and help us know what to do. You know them, right? How many of you know the 7 principles? 1, each person is important. 2, be kind in all you do. 3, each other learn. 4, and search for what is true. 5, all people have a voice. Oh, say. 6, it's more there. 7, we take care of the earth. That brings us back to me and you. Y'all know different words than I learned. But I'm proud of you. Thank you. That was very, very good. I do know all 7 principles. I did have to learn them in seminary. That's what we do. Anyway, it is a joy to see each and every one of you, and I'm tickled that you're here, and I can't wait to see what you do this year. Thank you.
Woohoo! Well, welcome to another church year, my friends. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Amanda Esko, and I'm the Director of Religious Education. Being the Director of Religious Education for the First Unitarian Church is the best gig I have ever had. Each day is entirely different. Some days, I'll be studying Unitarian Universalist history. Other days, I'll be writing. Some days, I'll be making a meal. I might be making posters. I might be working with Lissa, our religious education assistant, to solve a problem. My favorite days, however, are Sundays. Sundays are when the church is full of people, full of children, full of worship. I'll find classrooms of kindergartners reading a book about community. Another room, the endowment committee is meeting. Meditations in the parlor, teenagers are in the haven, and 5th and 6th grade are fighting horcruxes of sickness and poverty. On Sundays, this church becomes filled with its most important mission, serving the needs of this beloved community. I am eternally grateful for this community that does love and support religious education. I'm grateful for Lissa Lander, our own Mary Poppins, who tirelessly works to make sure everyone has everything they need and that there's beauty and art for all of us. Reverend Monica and Reverend Tom, who prioritize youth and religious education here. Our community, who supports the bake sales, claps for junior choir, and tears up during the coming of age service. My gratitude extends to the multitude of people it takes every Sunday to make religious education happen. Last year, I did a little math, and I realized that it took 1,200 volunteer hours to ensure religious education happens. You heard me right, 1,200 hours. Our classroom teachers do the majority of that time. This year, we are fortunate to have Melinda Pettengill, Darren Patterson, Erica Krutzinger, Carrie Black, Calvin Black, Julie Miller, Kendra Smith, Ian Mitchell, Karen Baumgartner, Raleigh Smith, and Peter Esko to thank for giving up their time worshiping in the sanctuary to worshiping with our youth in their classrooms. I'd also like to thank our new youth advisor, Brian Gregory, for stepping into that role. And our child care providers, Jennifer Hartel and Bethany Mose, who are, tending the infants and toddlers as we speak. While I still have the pulpit, or, the step, I want to extend a challenge to our congregation this church year. You may have noticed this, but I'm kind of all about community. This year, I challenge all of you sitting in these pews to stretch yourself to grow this community. Introduce yourself to a new family that you don't know. Help a child pour juice at the coffee hour, if for no other reason than they don't spill it. Invite the family that has the new baby to sit next to you in the pew. Join our kids outside and drink your coffee on the playground. Come to our dinners and potlucks, like the one we have next week after service. It'll be fun. Smile, invite. While I, of course, encourage everyone to teach and volunteer in RE, what if you start small by learning the name of a youth and meeting their parents that you didn't know before? By investing in making our families feel connected, wanted, and loved, we are investing in the health and well-being of our community. I'm going to end by quoting the most famous quotable Unitarian, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Be silly, be honest, be kind. Let's push ourselves as we build our community to live up to this. Thank you, my friends. And David's going to play. We're just out of here.
By the way, I am a Unitarian, where are my badge right here, is unique to this church. The composer is right here. And I must tell you, I remember the unveiling of that song many years ago. It was the Celebration Sunday, and there we were packed at Rose Wagner Theater, and our guest speaker was the UUA president, Bill Sinkford. And as we, in a most campy way, did I Am a Unitarian, and the kids were rebelling, and they all had their badges right here, I said to the UUA president, "Isn't this wonderful?" And he said, "Ugh." Lighten up, will you? I mean, come on. So that song really is very unique to this church and will remain unique to this church. I am quite sure. Yeah. Couple of announcements. One, nobody stole our windows, so we're relieved to hear that. This is indicative of a very important capital campaign that we are doing right now. Big energy efficiency push, have double windows, and so the storms are on now, and all those individual panes are all being restored so that we keep the original glass going back to 1927, and it's going to be gorgeous when that's done, and the pillars are being done out front, and so we're doing a lot of work. However, we got off to a tremendous start. It began in May 15th of this year, and we immediately got about 60% of our goal of $500,000. Then the summer came. And what we need to do now, in all seriousness, is revitalize this capital campaign so we can finish the job. And so if you are part of that 40% that we need to finish the job, please pick up a pledge card on a table right outside here and make a pledge to the capital campaign. It is a pledge over 3 years, so give it a good think and try to be as generous as you can. And let's make this church truly energy efficient and fix all the glaring things that are wrong, and we'll all feel better about it. This is our home after all. Also want to mention that one of the great things about this congregation and many UU churches across the country it's a program called Small Group Ministry, and that they are reconvening. As a reminder, these are groups that meet once a month, about 10 people in a group, to discuss absolutely fascinating topics, and it's a wonderful way to get to know one another outside of the madness called coffee hour. It's a wonderful, intimate setting and enriches everybody's experience. And there's a sign-up table for people for small group ministry. You can also sign up, register online. Please make note of that. And I also want to mention that we'll have all the dates confirmed in print, but I could tell you that I'm going to begin a book discussion group one day a month. And it's going to be a way for us to, perhaps with a little luck and lots of discussion, come to understand the African American experience through African American literature. And so we're going to start, our first book will be Colin Whitehead's The Nickel Boys, and we're going to have our first book discussion augmented by TED Talks. It's going to be, I think, a pretty interesting hour and a half that we'll have together. And that's going to be on Monday, September 30th. Then the subsequent month, it will be the 24th of October. We'll be doing Toni Morrison's Beloved. And then the book for November has yet to be decided. I'm weighing between a couple of fascinating books. So you don't need to register. There'll be reminders. Just come read the book. Come and participate in the conversation. I promise you it'll be a very lively conversation indeed. I think that's it. So at this point, the offering will now gratefully be received, a chance to greet one another and bid each other a fine welcome back to church. sure feels good to be back as a church community running on all cylinders once again. Our religious education program is humming now with the sound of young children echoing the uninhibited joy of life itself. Our older students will be engaged in their coming-of-age curricula, where they will unscramble their personal beliefs and learn what to do with their beliefs in a world that is really quite intolerant. We are fast becoming, as we know, devoid of basic human rights. And so I want to say, okay, kids, now you figured it out. We bunched it up. You guys figured it out. What are we going to do? Senior high kids will engage in lofty discussions about anything that's esoteric, because that's so important. The church is humming once again with committees reconvening, coffee percolating, and the capital campaign in full swing to transform this old building into a model of green efficiency. The choir started rehearsing again and will be singing next week. The Sanctuary Steering Committee meets today after the church, and the board meets tomorrow night, and the auction committee is bustling, and the many facets of church life have been resurrected as if by magic. And all that really happened was that summer ended, and without a blink, we automatically came back and resumed our ecclesiastical positions once again, and we are humming. It's time. It's time for church once again. And perhaps there's never been a more crucial time or urgent need to re-engage in church community than now, than right now. And I say that with this being my 45th ingathering Sunday as a Unitarian minister. And that's a lot. Thank you. All I meant to say is a lot of Septembers by which to measure the spirit of a congregation about to commence their new church year. Now, don't get me wrong, liberals have experienced many a hard summer during my years of ministry, dealt from the hand of Nixon and Reagan and Bush. And I've never attended, ever, in all those 45 years, attended an ingathering Sunday feeling that our work was done. I never had the chance to say, the world is in fine stead. We can all go home now. Hasn't happened. I have never missed my church community as badly as I have this summer. Our values, our principles, our assumptions about fairness and equality have been smacked down, and I mean smacked down pretty hard in ways I never thought possible. I mean, there have been strong disagreements with policies in the past. I mean, there have been protests about and against senseless wars. There have been human rights denied. But never in my memory has this country attempted to redefine human rights. That's what we're doing. We're redefining human rights. Now, through all the hard times we've been through as a nation, working to repair a system of justice that should work for everyone, we never ever really fully turned our backs on the essence, the very core of human rights, as posited in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Eleanor Roosevelt led that charge, which was adopted in 1948 and translated into more than 500 languages. It begins with, whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Whereas disregard and contempt for our human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind, and a whole bunch of other whereases. Now, therefore, the General Assembly proclaims this universal Declaration of Human Rights as a common standard of achievement for all peoples in all nations, to the end that every individual and every organ of society, keeping this declaration constantly in mind, shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms. And it goes on. Well, this summer, the Trump administration established a commission of inalienable rights to examine the meaning of human rights. Human rights? What's that really all about? Well, according to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, quote, the administration takes seriously the founders' ideas on individual liberty. He then asked, what does it mean to say or claim that something is, in fact, a human right? How can there be human rights, rights we possess not as privileges we are granted or even earn, but simply by virtue of our humanity? How can there be rights that aren't earned or deserved? The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, written 71 years ago, when the shadow of the Holocaust still loomed large, made it abundantly clear that human rights are grounded in the dignity inherent in every human being. They are not God-given rights. They're not Trump-given rights, although they apparently seem to be one and the same these days. Human rights apply to people of all faiths and to those who have none. They include freedom of speech, the press, assembly, religion, and the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. Nations around the world, including ours, must defend these rights while combating discrimination on the basis of race, ethnicity, disability, gender, or sexual orientation. Now, we can ill afford to forget that disregard for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts. So the United States has withdrawn from the United Nations Human Rights Council. The United Nations has withdrawn from the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. This administration has excised reproductive rights from the annual State Department report on human rights. It's watered down a recent United Nations Security Council resolution on victims of rape in armed conflict. So in efforts to redefine human rights, the President has manifested utter contempt for the rule of law, a free press, an independent judiciary, gay rights, minority rights, women's rights, the safety of migrant children. This is all a recipe for disaster, a precursor to barbarous acts. Now, the impact of a summer filled with these unprecedented actions has wrought a devastating effect on all of us. I've never before seen such despair, people talking about these inexplicable tears that just come out of nowhere. Bouts of depression. People admitting they're in this paralyzing funk. Never have I seen all of that as I have during the unwinding of this summer. And so we come to this church hoping to grab onto a scrap of sanity and inspiration in a deranged world. This church community is like a temple for renewing and revitalizing our beleaguered values. Now, as central as this community is to so many of us, don't you ever wonder how we actually stay together as a group? I mean, there are no rules. There's no creed or dogma that makes us think and feel and act in the same way. In fact, quite the opposite. The greatest source of pride among Unitarians is their independent thinking. Well, frankly, that can make for a pretty messy church community in terms of operating. What holds us together? Where's the glue? There have been many efforts throughout our history to saddle Unitarians with creeds so we don't wander too far afield. Although all these dogmas have been rejected, my favorite creed comes from the UU minister Jack Mendelson, and I think it's one we could all abide by. And he just proposed this creed, and it goes like this. It's very short. Count your blessings and carry on. Could we live with that as our creed? Count your blessings and carry on. Wow, that's a fine doctrine for this church. But even that was challenged. Jack, what is a blessing? What does it mean to carry on? So he modified his dogma slightly. So it says this now. Savor your small successes and digest well your constant frustration. That could work. See if we can revitalize that. There was a time in the 1860s when Unitarians were split between, and these labels were actually used, a split between evangelical Unitarians, imagine that, and radical Unitarians. The evangelicals wanted a dogma to preserve the Christian tradition of Unitarianism, while the radicals freaked out at the idea of a dogma, actually left the American Unitarian Association and formed the FRA, the Free Religious Association, in 1867. It took the great mediation skills of Henry Bellows, minister of the All Souls Unitarian Church in New York City, which he served for 43 years. Nothing. It took this great mediator to strike a compromise and bring those radicals back into the fold. He argued that we needed a broadly based denominational structure that acknowledged Unitarian Christians without requiring a doctrine, which is all the radicals needed to hear, and so they all came back and we lived under the same roof happily ever after. I don't know, all Bellows really said was, count your blessings and carry on. We've got to carry on. And carry on we did for quite a while, not altogether sure what it actually is that does hold us together. Until we get to a rather exciting period in our history in the 1980s. The UUA determined that we identify certain values that we hold together in common. It was a huge project in which every UU congregation from coast to coast participated. Now, as a 33-year-old minister in Waltham, Massachusetts, I convened countless groups in my congregation dedicated to following the processes and procedures that would result in a common thread of purpose and values. We were out to find the glue connecting disciplined New England churches and the radical churches along the Pacific West Coast. We constructed sentences, fought about commas, argued ideas well into the night before sending off the latest installment to headquarters in Boston. We were animated and spent by the enormity of the task that was truly inclusive of everyone. It really came from the ground up. These are not principles that were handed from the top down. These were the people, grassroots, from the ground up. By 1985, delegates to the General Assembly voted to adopt our 7 UU principles. And there at the top of the list of our cherished connective values was Unitarian Universalists affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. We as a denomination affirmed and set out to promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, as well as simply the acceptance of one another, the democratic process, world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Concluding the 7th one with respect for the interconnected web of all existence of which we are a part. We did it. We were proud. We felt a kinship with our larger churches back then in Chicago, Minneapolis, Seattle, San Francisco, and with our tiny congregations scattered in the prairie, down south, in former New England mill towns. So one day, it must have been in the autumn of 1985, I took the 7 principles with me to one of our Waltham ecumenical meetings. We didn't call them interfaith in those days. It was a period of time in which we strived for, the big word was ecumenism. So we had ecumenical meetings. I loved my group, although it took some time really for them to accept me. And my predecessor did not exactly pave the way for me when he confounded all the clergy by referring to himself as a Christian atheist. It took a while for them to warm up to the new Unitarian minister, who might be God knows what. Actually, they didn't care if I was an atheist. They didn't care if I was a Christian. They just couldn't abide by these silly hyphens, which actually seemed to mock religion. So I passed out the 7 principles to a bunch of priests, the rabbi, my closest colleague in those days, who was a minister of the Free Evangelical Church. He somehow took a wrong turn, I think, and he could have easily been a Unitarian minister. There were Episcopals and Congregationalists and Methodists and Lutherans and Baptists. We were all really deeply committed to one another and held programs and luncheons and chatted endlessly about everything. Well, the program that day was a discussion about Unitarian Universalist principles. Now, the upshot was this. My clergy buddies contended that these 7 principles were not religious. I said these principles could be adopted by everyone and anyone. I said, hey, we all believe in human rights, and we all believe in the dignity of all people and democracy in this precious earth. That doesn't mean we're Unitarians. I actually thought their comments were grounded in a bit of residual anger aimed at my Christian atheist predecessor. I remember more my discomfort than what I actually said. I wish I had the wherewithal to have said the following, although I think I came pretty close. You're missing the point entirely. It's very nice of you to believe in human rights and compassion and human relations. So nice, you got these warm feelings about justice throughout the world. But where might I or anyone find that embodied in your religious institution. Now remember now, the 7 principles express institutional values. Institutional values which are unique in that they convey what really matters in the world we live in. And so here we have a church that dares to tackle all that is so wrong, blatantly wrong in our communities with a deep and profound commitment, not because it feels a deep commitment to address these issues. Now, the principles are not warm, fuzzy feelings. They're an institutional commitment to human rights, to environmental rights, to make religion relevant to our everyday lives. You know, with these principles now, I can safely walk into any Unitarian Universalist church in the country and know that these people and I share the same moral outlook, and we together strive to live our lives defending the inherent worth and dignity of every person on this planet. What individuals think privately is easy. It differs greatly from what a church proclaims publicly. Doctrines that seek conformity about the supernatural world have had their heyday. I don't think they still speak convincingly to people in these precarious times today. You know, with the help of old-time religion, a curious loophole has been discovered in God's creation concerning hierarchy. It argues that because God places humans above things, above animals and plants and oceans, we can then, with a clear conscience, let all those things just go to hell. Well, that's not working for us anymore. We need to imagine the world differently. And is that not the underlying role of religion for today? To imagine the world differently. And also, along with my good friend from Harvard Divinity School, Peter Gomes, he would just say over and over and over again, we do not have to be as we are. Just think about it. We do not have to be as we are. We are transformed within our church community through our covenant and by our commitment to the 7 principles. Now, the passion for individual liberty is part of our Unitarian DNA. There's nothing wrong with that unless we fail to supplement it with a vision of the moral community. Okay? So yeah, you've got your rights, you've got your own way of doing things, but you also need to come together with a vision of the whole moral community. Because without a clear vision of the moral community, Unitarian Universalism, like every liberal faith then, will have little to offer the world, so smitten right now with white nationalism. Again, disregard for human rights has resulted in barbarous acts. The 7 principles offer us not conformity in belief, but unity in purpose. They underscore what each and every one of us values and remind us that it is only by working together as one religious community that we can feel strong enough, courageous enough, bold enough to defend the inherent dignity of every person on this earth and to defend the earth itself. So, welcome back to First Unitarian Church. And step out of your despair, get a Kleenex and dry your eyes, because we've got work to do. And I am so grateful that we will be working together. Thanks for coming back this summer. Let us end our service turning our hymn books, please, to number 168. As we extinguish the chalice, may we conclude our service the words of Ronald Dworkin, a very distinguished political philosopher who wrote, "Since the Enlightenment, political philosophers have debated the merits of two views about what democracy really is. The first view is a majoritarian conception, that a majority of voters should have the power to do anything it thinks right or in its own interest. The second is communal. It insists that democracy is government of and by and for not the majority, but for all the people as a whole." Amen.